In LO2, we're going to look at what actually drives evolution. There are 5 things that tend to make evolution happen. As you can see here, we're going to talk about mutations in genetics, natural selection, which we've already hit on, gene flow, genetic drift, and non-random mating. Mutations. Remember that mutations are changes in DNA that get passed on. These arise spontaneously, and as a result of being passed on over time, if it's favorable, it can keep getting chosen for by the environmental conditions and drive mutations in the population. For example, in the picture here, there are different wing types of flies, so these all arose as mutations. This is your normal fruit fly, and then you can see a mutation drove this crunched up wing pattern, this one versus that one versus having no wings. And let's say for some reason that having this wing right here is favorable. Well, if it's favorable, that fly is going to survive better and keep passing that trait on, and eventually the populations will have that wing pattern more often. A second genetic thing that causes that causes evolution is recombination. Back in meiosis, we talked about how DNA swaps pieces sometimes, called crossing over, and by swapping pieces between chromosomes, we're increasing the amount of variety. Variety can lead to adaptations, which might be favorable and therefore drive evolution. And finally, the last genetic thing is fertilization. There are so many different combinations between egg and sperm that, even to make you, there were trillions of possibilities. If a different sperm made it to your mother's egg, you could have been a completely different person. Just think about that. It's pretty profound. If you look up here at this beetle, just to simplify it a little bit, this beetle, we're only looking at color, has 2 alleles for green. This one has brown and green. So obviously being brown is the dominant trait, because if it has at least one of the brown alleles, it'll express being brown as a phenotype. The possibilities of children then would be this versus that, still brown, or that, or that. And as you can see, it just depends on which sperm and which egg combine to provide those possibilities. All of these sources of variation allow natural selection to occur. Variation, there's a trait that is different within species, and then if that's favorable, it's going to get picked for over and over and over. If everything was the same, like if you've ever seen The Matrix, these guys are all the same. If there were no differences, no variation, nothing would be favorable, and therefore evolution wouldn't occur. It wouldn't select for a favorable trait because everything would be identical. The genetic thing ties into the second driver of evolution, which is natural selection. The fact that if something is favorable, it's going to show up more often. So for a giraffe, having a longer neck means it's going to get more food. Because it's getting more food, it's surviving more, it's fitter, it's reproducing more. That trait will be passed on. The short-necked giraffes are going to die out over time. They don't have food, they can't reproduce, they can't pass their traits on. So, 5 possible things. We have genetic flow, genetic drift, and non-random mating left. Gene flow is simply the idea that genes can move from one population to another. This can bring new traits into a population, but also cause traits to exit a population. The 2 ways that we have gene flow would be emigration, with an E, is exiting a population, and immigration is entering a population, in immigration. The populations below. On the left, you have a population of beetles that are only green. On the right, they are only brown. We have a brown beetle exit its population, and enter this green population, and now it just brought a new trait with it. It brought a new gene, or a new allele of the gene. So now you'd have some brown in here, plus green, and then over here it would still be only brown. That can drive evolution. Just a side note, because gene pool did come up here in this definition, a gene pool is when you're looking at all of the genetic information of a population. If you're looking at the frogs here, we'd be considering their color, their size, their shape, every single trait that is coded for. And just to simplify it here, it's showing color, that these are all the possibilities that the frogs could possibly have. The 4th thing that can drive evolution is genetic drift. So consider this. I'm just going to read it. In each generation, some individuals may, just by chance, leave behind a few more descendants and genes, of course, than other individuals. So they just happen to get lucky and have a bunch of kids. The genes of the next generation will be the genes of those lucky individuals, not necessarily the healthier or the better ones. It's going to be more random. So yeah, you do have selection for the healthier individuals and the more fit individuals. But if an organism has a ton of babies, of course that's going to increase how many of their genes are getting passed on to, just by chance. This is a little bit different from natural selection because this is random. Natural selection happens on purpose, that certain things are getting chosen for because they're more advantageous. This is just by luck. So in the picture down below, this is kind of like the opposite idea, that some get randomly killed off, so we lose some of that variation. It's just random. It's just by chance that we gain or lose certain genes from a population. The last thing that causes evolution is non-random mating. This is the idea that mating between organisms is not random. Females are picky and choose males for certain things. Females tend to look for traits that show that the male is healthy, and by picking a healthy, big, strong-looking male, they're probably higher in reproductive fitness, overall health. It ensures that their genes are going to get passed on. So if you were a fox looking for a mate and you have the choices of the two down below here, the two pictures, you would probably choose the fox on the right, unless you're sick and twisted, because the fox on the right obviously looks like it's healthy. You would not want to pick this mangy, sad, sick-looking fox to reproduce with, because if they're sick, maybe they have some disease that's going to get passed on to your offspring. And a fox isn't necessarily thinking like that. They don't have the consciousness, as far as we know, that we do. However, they're looking for traits that make that fox more attractive, that show that they're healthy. So a female would most likely pick this one. It's not random. Other examples of non-random mating would be peacocks. The brighter their feathers, the healthier they are. Certain funny things that organisms do include mating calls, certain mating dances, having very bright, colorful displays. There are lizards that look like they do push-ups. So I have a whole bunch of videos that are linked up on my webpage, which is fhsmissb.weebly.com, in the evolution section about non-random mating. And check them out. They're pretty cool, especially things like the moonwalking mannequin, and they're just really funny. So check out the videos on my webpage. Okay, go to biology, find evolution. If you can't find them, let me know. Refer to your note packet for what's next, and if you have any questions, please see me.